mic is not on, so if you can't hear me in the back, just raise your hand. Come on in. Good afternoon. My name is Angela Brown. I am the program manager for the Tennessee Child Passenger Safety Center located at Meharry Medical College. We are so delighted that you have come to this special event. Your presence is so appreciated. Before I get started, I would like to thank a couple of people for the planning and preparation of the event. Dr. Goodman, of course, we would not be in this room if it wasn't for Dr. Goodman. He got the ball rolling on this, so thank you so much, Dr. Goodman. There you are. The Public Information Officer for the Highway Safety Office, Ariel Thompson, I don't know where, there you are. Yes. Thank you so much. Shelley Walker and Dana Garrett, please raise your hand with the Rutherford County Health Department. Our team at Tennessee Tech University, they keep us straight with the technical stuff. And they brought Ollie Otter here. So he's with the booster seat program. And of course, Mrs. Sanders, it has been a pleasure and a privilege, and that's on a personal note, working with you. So thank you so much for your input. This is National Child Passenger Safety Week, a campaign dedicated solely to educating parents and caregivers on the proper installation of child safety seats. And we are kicking this week off by honoring Dr. Sanders, better known as Dr. Seatbelt, for his leadership role in passing the first child passenger safety law in 1977. As a child passenger safety instructor, I know firsthand the challenges that parents face with car seat installation. And although there is more work that's needed, we cannot forget where we've come from. So let's take a trip down memory lane and watch a video as Mrs. Sanders recalled Dr. Sanders' efforts made 40 years ago, okay? Dr. Sanders definitely set the tone. In fact, now, today, we have every state in the District of Columbia that has child passenger safety laws. We're very proud of that, and that's one thing I make sure that I brag about at national conferences, that we were the first to incorporate a child passenger safety law. We have over 1,000 technicians across the state that provide resources to parents. We have over 130 fitting stations across the state, and we have the Ollie Otter Booster Seat program. And could you say it for me one good time? 4 feet 9? It's booster time. It's definitely a ringing bell in other states as well, because this program has trickled to other states. So we have something to be proud of, and today is a very special day, so enjoy. I'm going to have our director, Vic Donoho, come up with a couple of words.
Hello. As she said, I'm Vic Donoho, the director of the Highway Safety Office. And let me say thank you to the Health Department for allowing us to invade your space today. And it's such a fitting location to have a child passenger safety start-off campaign, I guess, for a start-off campaign for the Child Passenger Safety Week, and that's a National Child Passenger Safety Week. Ms. Sanders, thank you and your late husband for all the work that he did to save lives of children all across this nation, especially here in Tennessee. I read just a little bit on the way where there's over 6,000 that was saved up until 2003, and there was no other data available of what I was reading, but I can't even imagine the numbers if we actually knew how many lives have been saved, like you said, that wouldn't have them before. I also want to thank our many special guests that are here. I'm not going to try to name everyone, but law enforcement family, our education family, our partners, our SAD and MAD, and Ollie Otter, Tennessee Tech University, and many, many others, the Health Department, many others that are here on this special occasion as we recognize the efforts that happened 40 years ago here in Tennessee, and started a ripple effect, as Angela said, all across the nation, where every state and the District of Columbia now have a child passenger safety law. Partnerships are important, and partnerships is what the Tennessee Highway Safety Office develops. partnerships with law enforcement, partnerships with educators, partnerships with health departments, partnerships with universities, and partnerships with the motoring public, because the motoring public voluntary compliance is the most important in making sure that child passenger safety seat is installed correctly, inspected by a certified technician, and the child is properly strapped in that child safety seat. It's just very important. And partnerships, it's a partnership that we have all across the state. As Angela alluded to, 124 fitting stations with over 1,000 certified technicians. At this time, I know she's been on video and may not want to get up here and say a whole lot, but I'm going to ask Ms. Sanders to come up and speak a few words.
I'm glad to. I will say Safe Kids made me a poster. And Safe Kids is going back to the legislature this year. They had a break from it, but this is the 40th, yes, it's the 40th anniversary. But there's the one Safe Kids made, and it's really nice. That is a General Motors love seat, and it's not as safe as what they're making now. I mean, a lot of improvement with car seats. Thank you. We have some people here that were in on the original. We've got the co-sponsor, Mike Murphy. I'm looking. Where'd he go? There he is over here with his daughter Kathleen. She's on the Metro Council. The sponsor for the bill in the session, the legislative session of 1976, when it failed, unfortunately, was John Bragg, and he also sponsored it in '77. And Mike was co-sponsor both years. And he knows what we went through with Roscoe Pickering, as you just heard. Sorry, he didn't like our calling it the Child Crusher Amendment, but a baby had been crushed. What else are you going to call it? And Sherry Chappell is here, and she was mentioned because of her child being saved, twirled around with that sandal in the back seat. I don't know how that happened, but she's here. Sherry. There she is. Her son was not only saved, he's doing great. He's a lawyer now, living in Tennessee. What about the love seat?
He was in the love seat,
Oh,
by the way.
this is what he was in?
This is what he was in. I still have it.
Oh, well, it was more protective than I realized. So was he facing the rear?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, good, yeah. We have John Hood. Yes, John Hood was in the legislature under Governor Sunquist and Bredesen, and he worked on primary, what do you call it, primary what?
Well, we changed it from secondary enforcement to primary enforcement, where a person could be stopped for not having your child seated up before it had a secondary incident.
Good, good. Thank you for coming, and thank you for doing all you did in the legislature as well as Mike, for goodness sake. I want to thank Charlie Goodman again, who instigated this, and his wife, he and Delia, have been so interested in this topic and so supportive, 40 years or more now. And Angela and Ariel and all your work, and Dana, thank you.
Pat, one more word about
Yeah, yeah.
enforcement. The utilization at that time was about 68%. After we passed the legislation, it went up to almost 80% usage. That's what we're trying to do, save lives.
Right, fabulous. Because we wondered about the number that had been saved. And I got in touch with someone, Marilyn Bull, a pediatrician in Indianapolis, and she got in touch with NHTSA, which is National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. But we love to call it NHTSA, easier. Sandy Sinclair at NHTSA said that the number saved from the enactment of January 1978 is up to 12,000 babies saved by the seat. That's the good news. And of course, they're keeping count. The bad news is it's still the #1 killer. From age 1, or some are saying from 0 birth to 13. I saw a pediatrician on with Charlie Goodman saying it was age 17, but the NHTSA people told me it was 1 to 13 is the #1 killer. The killer is the car crash. And it's because of non-use and misuse. And we were talking about if you go to anybody that's got grandchildren, you're having a hard time, go to the police. They know how to show you how to use the seats, and they have checkpoints, and they try to keep people to using these seats correctly, and that's just absolutely very important. But I wanted to say a personal thing about Bob Sanders, if I can get through it. If you swallow, it helps. He was interning in pediatrics 1955 to 56. And Dr. Randolph Batson was on the faculty in pediatrics, and he handed him this thing and said, how'd you like to give the first Salk vaccine to prevent children from having polio? Jonas Salk vaccine. So he gave the first one for the state of Tennessee, and that sort of made an impression. And it worked, too, and they had the Sabin with the oral vaccine for polio, which is better. The other thing, when he was in the emergency room, he had things happen like a baby swallowed an open safety pin into the stomach. They went in and turned it around and brought it up, but it punctured the pericardium in the heart, and it died. And he thought, that could have been prevented. And the other thing was a girl that had an abscess in the brain. They did an x-ray and found something metal in there. And they said, where have you been? What have you been doing? And she said, well, I do remember I was hit in the head or felt something while my brother was mowing the lawn. Bullet, it's like a speed of a bullet. Something metal went into her brain, and she had the abscess. She was impaired for life, but did live. Dr. Christie was the chairman of pediatrics, and he was a big mentor for Bob for many reasons. He had a poodle, and he was standing in his yard. Someone was mowing the lawn across the street, threw a golf ball right into his poodle and killed it across the street. So watch out for flying missiles if you're around people mowing lawns. He would never let our children be in the yard while someone's mowing. He didn't want more than 2 people mowing at the same time. He went to Sweden to do, as I guess I was saying, research before he went into practice and then public health. And he came back, and we have a friend from Stockholm who's come. He lives in Nashville now, Dr. Sundell. He was in med school, so he doesn't remember. It was 1958 to 59, but Bob knew this physician who was using a seatbelt in his car. Well, we had seatbelts over here in airplanes. Is that right, Mark? In 1958, we would have had seatbelts on airplanes, not in automobiles. So that made an impression on Bob. And they also, a lot of people were driving with their lights on in the daytime. So he came back from Sweden and was telling me all about this, had me get a seatbelt down at the dealership, and he said, drive with your lights on. Well, whenever I do that, people say, your lights are on. Well, the reason is to be seen. It's also why I have a red car. I want to be seen. So when he did get hold of this article in 1975 and realized the children were neglected on the nation's highway, the article Anne-Marie Sheldon has worked on for 10 years with that pediatrician, education she thought was the answer. It was the #1 killer, and that's when it hit him, the fall of 75. And that was the goal, go after the #1 killer. So if you've got any questions, I'm happy to answer. Otherwise, I hope I thanked everybody and using this building in this room. It's wonderful. Appreciate it. And goodness gracious, I thought it was going to be cookies. There's food all across. There, 3 vanilla wafers, as McWhirter used to say, and a cup of coffee, and I'm ready to go to work. Well, speaking of McWhirter, when John Bragg came to him, After the bill failed, and they got ready for the next session for 1977, he said, "You mean Dr. Seatbelt's going to come back down here?" And that's when he got the nickname. That's from McWhirter, and John Bragg was luckily willing to sponsor it again, and we're just so happy that he did, because he had a lot of clout. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sanders.
Oh, listen, this is Dr. Radford Smith, and he is the reason that the building is named for Bob. Dr. Brad Smith practiced internal medicine here for several years, and he went to the county commission, and your son went with you. Yeah, after Bob died. And I appreciate everything you've done. Thank you.
Thank you. Now it's my honor to introduce the Commissioner of the Department of Safety and Homeland Security, who's no stranger to public service. He's been in public service 38 years, starting out as a 911 dispatcher, an EMT, an accreditation manager, a TBI agent, a trooper, and last 16 years as a county mayor. So let me introduce Commissioner David W. Purkey to say a few words.
Thank you, Vic, and good afternoon, everyone. Ms. Sanders, I would, as a former county mayor, I would say that when a stranger to a facility gets out of their vehicle and the first thing they see is a plaque with someone's name on it, you know something big has happened there. So it's my pleasure to participate in this today. We have several top people with our department here today. Our Deputy Commissioner and Chief of Staff, Dave McGriff, the Colonel of the Highway Patrol, Dereck Stewart, that you'll hear in a minute, one of the Lieutenant Colonels, Tony Barham, Sergeant Kaplinger, several members of our, obviously our Highway Safety Office, our law enforcement liaisons, our grant specialists here on the front, just a lot of good people who do work for you every day. And also, I want to recognize some friends and great supporters of public safety. You know these people, your sheriff, Sheriff Fitzhugh, good friend of mine, Chief Bowen. Yeah, I see you now in the back of the Murfreesboro Police Department, a good friend. And I want a very special person to me is Bill Kettering, your new county mayor. Had the opportunity to work with him for almost 8 years as a state senator. There is no greater supporter of public safety. He supported my department. He supported local public safety. And Bill, I'm just glad that I was a former county mayor and you're a county mayor, and we share that spirit. Some of our state representatives and members of the General Assembly, some who may not be here yet, but I want to mention their names because, again, they're big supporters of what we do. Shane Reeves, State Senate, Tim Rudd, Representative Rudd, saw him earlier, Representative Don White, Representative White, I saw you come in, Steve Sandlin, the Deputy Mayor of Rutherford County, and also let me recognize Dr. Michael Warren, who is Deputy Commissioner of the Department of Health. Very briefly, something you may not know about me. I have a master's in public health. I have no idea why I got that degree. I can tell you that I met my wife at the health department, so I guess the Lord was doing that to prepare me to deal with her. I was sharing with your director, we've been married 22 years. She's a health educator in East Tennessee. When I left her this morning, told her what I was going to do, she said, "Well, don't embarrass me," at the podium. So what a big deal this is. As a former trooper, I wrote my share of baby seat tickets. That's what we called them. We were very happy to have that statute to deal with. We knew that it made an impact, and I can tell you that never, as a trooper, did I work a wreck that a child was in a restraint device and lost their life. Never did I do that. I know it happens in a catastrophic accident. I understand that. But I'm telling you, the biggest majority of the time, you will find a crying child, and that is music to your ears at the scene of a bad wreck. So congratulations, what a crowd. It's good to be in the health department, good to be with friends. And Ms. Sanders, thank you for Dr. Seatbelt.
Thank you.
It's rare that I introduce some of the top folks in our department on the same day, but introduce the commissioner. Now I'm going to introduce Colonel Dereck Stewart, longtime friend of mine. He came on about a year and a half before I did. He commands the nearly 1,000 state troopers all across the state. Before being appointed colonel, he was the lieutenant colonel over field operations, which commanded all of the enforcement personnel from Memphis to Mountain City. So Colonel Stewart, if you don't mind, come say a few words.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's very good for me to be here today. It's good to see all of you. I was thinking, I was sitting over there, the only thing that's more impressive about the size of this crowd and the enthusiasm about this crowd is Mrs. Sanders. Your enthusiasm and passion is very noteworthy, and we appreciate that. Thank you so much. I just want to talk to you a little bit about what's going on with the THP. The importance of conducting strict traffic enforcement of hazardous moving offenses has always been a priority for the Tennessee Highway Patrol. However, we did not always place an equal emphasis on occupant safety. We felt that we were doing a good job with the enforcement of seatbelt and child restraint violations, but once we took a look at the data, we realized that we were not doing as good as we actually could, so we took action. In 2010, the leadership of the Tennessee Highway Patrol directed our troopers to place an increased focus emphasis on the detection and arrest of impaired drivers. We also prioritize our focus on the enforcement of seatbelt and child restraint device violations. In 2010, we as an agency only issued 31,577 seatbelt and child restraint citations. As a leader in highway safety, we simply felt as though that was unacceptable. So again, we took action. Also in 2010, the unrestrained fatality rate was at 54%. As our enforcement in these areas increased, we stepped up and began to notice that a drop in the impaired and unrestrained fatal crashes in Tennessee. Our troopers began to see the fruits of their labor, and that inspired them to work even harder in their local areas. In 2017, we as an agency, we issued more than 115,000 seatbelt citations and child restraint violations. We also removed almost 7,500 impaired drivers off the roadways in Tennessee. This was a tangible result of our increased priority shift and has led to the unrestrained fatality rate dropping to 41%. This may be impressive to some, but we have a lot more work to do. So therefore, the men and women of the Tennessee Highway Patrol will continue to always promote highway safety by partnering and sharing strategies and information. The Tennessee Highway Patrol operates at its best when we do this, and as well as when we focus on occupant safety, hazardous, impaired, and distracted driving violators. This change in culture, we hope, carries over to our local law enforcement partners and agencies, primarily because we know far too many people are dying on the roadways of Tennessee. Working together, we will save lives in Tennessee. And I think if we can get everyone in this room working together towards that cause, we can reduce the number of traffic fatalities that are unnecessarily occurring in Tennessee. So thank you for your support.
And now it's my honor to introduce a friend of mine that I met a few years ago in a leadership class. He's the Deputy Commissioner of the Department of Health, Dr. Michael Warren.
Good afternoon. It's my pleasure to bring you greetings from the Tennessee Department of Health. And our mission at the Department of Health is to protect, promote, and improve the health and prosperity of people in Tennessee. And one of the things that makes public health different from traditional health care is that we try to prevent things from ever happening in the first place, bad things. We call that primary prevention. And we're fortunate in Tennessee to have a lot of hospitals and healthcare providers who can take great care of you when you're sick. But the real victory is if we can prevent that from occurring in the first place. And you heard Mrs. Sanders talk about the polio vaccine. Vaccination is a great public health win. But I think the story of Dr. Seatbelt and Ms. Sanders is another public health primary prevention win. I remember when I joined the department and first came to the Rutherford County Health Department, I saw the sign and plaque, and I remember asking Dana, is this where Dr. Seatbelt is from? Because I'd heard about him in my training. And so she took me around and showed me the memorabilia. Before I joined the department, I was on faculty at Vanderbilt, and I used to teach our residents and medical students about how important it was to engage policymakers in making the community a safer place for children. And we talked about how a pediatrician can make a difference in the community, and we always talked about the example of Dr. Seatbelt. There's an oral history that was recorded back in 2004, and if you've ever read the transcript, it's fascinating. If you haven't read it, I would encourage you to read it. But I want to share a couple of lessons that came from there. The first is this notion that you've heard about is it really takes people who care and who want to make a difference speaking up to their policymakers to make a difference. And so this was a quote from Dr. Sanders in that history. What we realized is that you're going to need some help by getting grassroots people to speak up. The way to do that is Pat and Bob walking up and down the hall, knocking on doors with a car seat in our hands. What's also evident when you read that transcript is the critical role that Ms. Sanders played. So Dr. Sanders said, well, I think it's apparent here, but I would like to remind our listeners that I don't think we would have a law were it not for Pat Sanders. Pat was a co-worker at every step and was a charming kind of lobbyist, if I may say so. But she worked hard on this just as I. She was tolerant about all those papers that would end up on the dining room table for years. So it's a great oral history, again, if you've got the chance to read it, and it talks about Dr. Sanders and his training very early on, his career in pediatrics, and his career after the seatbelt law passed, working even as county medical examiner and working with the health department. As you've heard, still, despite all of our successes, motor vehicle crashes are a leading cause of death for our children in Tennessee, particularly for our teenagers, but all across the lifespan. And even for those who are not killed but injured, they're a leading source of visits to hospitals and emergency departments. So still there is opportunity for work to be done. I think one of the important things to note is that our rates are about 2/3 lower than in the early 1980s, right after this law passed. And you heard about all the lives that have been saved, and certainly that's evident here in Tennessee as well. There's some things that we can all do. Many folks in this room are parents and caregivers. The first thing we can do is to be a good role model for our children and our grandchildren. They watch everything you do. And so if you get in the car and put on that seatbelt, they want to imitate you. They want to be like you. So you want to put on that seatbelt so they can say you don't want to text and drive or be distracted while you're driving because they think that's okay. For those younger kids, making sure they're in a car seat. As they get older, put them in a booster seat. They may not like it, but when they live to be older, they will thank you for it. And then, of course, as they transition into adolescence, making sure that they are buckled in a seatbelt. Our commissioner couldn't be here today, but he wanted me to share some words with you, so I will conclude with this. All here know, as do many who are absent, as I am regrettably from this celebration on this auspicious day, that the end of a long journey for Dr. Bob Sanders and his wife Pat meant the beginning of a new era in child and motor vehicle safety for all. But few know the many challenges and difficulties along the way that this public health hero couple, Dr. Robert Sanders and Ms. Pat Sanders, had to surmount to reach this landmark point in child safety, a point now so obvious in its importance and significance to longer and healthier lives for our precious children. As the Commissioner of Health in Tennessee, as a member of the Board of Directors of the National Safety Council, as a father and a citizen, I'm grateful to Dr. Bob Sanders and Ms. Pat Sanders for their example, for their persistence, for their vision, and for their courage. Please convey my deepest thanks and this small and overdue token of the Commissioner's Award for Outstanding Contributions to Population Health to Ms. Pat Sanders and to the memory of her beloved husband, the great Dr. Bob Sanders. Thank you.
Now, before we close, Dr. Goodman, could you come up and say a few words?
Thank you.
You bring in a medical file?
Yeah. We have 5 children and 11 grandchildren. They've all been benefited from riding in these seats. I guarantee you, every one of them, every travel goes in these seats. But I was embarrassed. A year and a half ago, we have 2 daughters. They both had babies, and they both had the baby seats, and they both got the little pamphlet even in Indiana and Knoxville where they lived. But they didn't know that law came from Tennessee. They didn't know Tennessee had the first law. They didn't know that people here in Murfreesboro, including Miss Sanders and her husband, were the cause of this. I can tell you, Dr. Sanders, I've known for 45 years, and my dad and his brother went to school together, so I've known that family a long time, and they're wonderful people. Dr. Sanders may have been the most mild-mannered person I ever knew, and I'm sure Dr. Smith will agree with me on that. But on this issue, he and Miss Sanders were like bulldogs. I've written one letter to an elected official in my life, and that was about this issue to Governor Blanton. And I got a response, I was glad to say. And we're all happy to have this, but I'm here to represent the Medical Society, who, by the way, paid for the plaque.
Thank you.
And as a father and a grandfather, and I appreciate all of you coming. It seemed like we'd be ashamed to pass the 40th anniversary of this very important law without some celebration, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
Before we close, I want to let Representative Hood know Tennessee currently has an 88.5% usage rate on seat belts. Thank you for your efforts.
Yeah.
Again, this concludes the press conference regarding the 40th anniversary of the passage of the Child Passenger Safety Law here in Tennessee.